Hi there, this is Tom Callaghan from CRisk. Today I'm going to talk about the importance of understanding the purpose of a risk assessment and the corresponding risk analysis that one performs. Very often, risk professionals rush into performing an analysis without perhaps taking the time to better understand what decisions that analysis will support, or maybe what questions it will answer and who the stakeholders are. So if you look at the FAIR standard and the taxonomy, it talks about the importance of understanding the organizational context, and it talks about the fact that we need to understand what's at stake from a leadership position. So a risk analysis should always inform a decision, and that decision will be made by multiple stakeholders who will ask some questions leading to that decision. If we don't do this step properly, it can lead to issues later on in the analysis. A common problem we see is people spending too much time collecting data which is not actually required to either support the decision or answer some of the questions. I talked about the importance of clearly defining decisions. I find when we're doing training courses or maybe working with customers, some people kind of find it hard to think about things in terms of decisions, and it's kind of a tool to help get beyond this is to think about what questions does the analysis answer, which will then lead to some of that improved decision making. So one of the things I would recommend doing is that as you embark upon a risk assessment or risk analysis is to create a table and list out those questions and those decisions, but also list out the stakeholders who are going to make the decisions, might be interested in also the answers to those questions. So let's talk about some of the typical decisions that a risk analysis actually supports. So one of the most important questions that I often find and that a board will be interested in is an organization managing technology risk in a way that protects the shareholders? That's a really kind of high-level, top-down question and decision which the board might be interested in. Another kind of important decision or question, again from an executive perspective, is our information security budget aligned to our technology risk? Another super important question is that should we declare a material technology risk to the SEC? We can see there's some new compliance obligations coming out for publicly traded companies in the US around SEC obligations, which really puts some of these questions to the forefront, and boards and organizations need to put the correct level of due diligence into understanding what they need to do with respect to these new regulations. So that's another kind of super important decision or question. If we kind of work down a little bit, another important decision or question is, do we have the right level of cyber insurance coverage, both in terms of the overall premium, but also in terms of the type of incidents that insurance policy may cover. Another more common question when you're talking to a CISO, maybe should I invest in one control family versus another, or for a particular control, should I choose solution A over solution B? So these are some of the examples of kind of the decisions that one can support using CRQ at a high level. Another important decision might be to what degree should an organization invest in a data privacy program, and this of course will depend upon what geographies they work in and how much personal data they collect and for what reasons. And again, we can use CRQ to kind of dig into some of those scenarios in a bit more detail. Another important decision might be should we implement a new set of security controls, knowing that will reduce productivity to a certain degree, but perhaps that reduction in productivity is appropriate with respect to how much risk reduction those controls will bring the organization. I'm going to kind of do a bit of a deep dive on one of the most common decisions and use cases for CRQ. There was some recent analysis done by Gartner which talks about the fact that most organizations start using CRQ to basically better articulate and explain to the board what the risk exposure is. So this is kind of a use case. This use case supports a decision. Some people kind of struggle with, okay, if I'm reporting cyber risks to the board, like what decisions am I actually supporting? Now, the board is kind of interested in making sure that the overall governance of technology risk is aligned to shareholders' interests. The board is probably less interested in doing a deep dive on controls with respect to a particular asset or system. So when you approach reporting cyber risks to the board, I would recommend keeping a small set of macro level scenarios, aligning those scenarios to business assets, basically allowing the board to kind of make some comparisons. We can split up risk scenarios perhaps by business unit, by geography, and by technology assets supporting revenue generating services. This allows the board to better understand perhaps different risk exposures across different business units and think about perhaps investing in one area versus another. Another important dynamic when reporting risk to the board is that the CISO or the CSO or the executive who's doing that reporting probably needs to give a point of view and a recommendation. It's not just sufficient sometimes to report on risk in terms of exposure, financially, but you also need to provide a recommendation, and the data that comes out of your risk assessment will support that recommendation. I guess another important aspect when making a decision at an executive level in an organization regarding risk is that decisions are going to be taken by multiple stakeholders and often in indirect fashion. So another good use case for the use of risk quantification, expressing risk in financial terms, is to be able to get all of the stakeholders on the same page with respect to defining what that risk is, that's the scenario scoping, and how it's measured, which is the financial aspect. It kind of helps to take perhaps some of the emotion out of these discussions when everybody has a clear definition for what we're talking about. So thank you for listening to this video. I hope it was informative. Just to kind of wrap up again, before you embark upon a risk assessment and a risk analysis, try to think about what the purpose is, try to think about the decisions you're supporting, what questions you're going to answer, list them out on the table, understand who your stakeholders are. If you're interested in exploring this topic in more detail and learning more about it, you can check out our website, check out our blog, and send us any questions via LinkedIn. Thank you.